stream other great series, log in to ABC iView.
Tonight, forgive and forget. The Prime Minister tries to move on from another text scandal.
What people send around in texts, I frankly could not care less about.
Also tonight, crowds return to Melbourne's annual Midsummer Pride March. The Queen marks a platinum jubilee and backs Camilla to one day become Queen Consort. And bronzed Aussie Tess Cody wins Australia's first medal of the Beijing Winter Olympics. Hello and welcome to ABC News Sunday. I'm Mary Gearan. The Prime Minister says he has forgiven Barnaby Joyce for branding him a hypocrite and a liar in an explosive text message sent last year. It's the second damaging leak in the space of a week, but Scott Morrison is trying to move on from the drama, declaring politics is a brutal business. Here's political reporter Jane Norman.
Delivering Sunday morning absolution.
Human frailty, it's real. We all share it.
The Prime Minister forgives his deputy for his sins.
People get angry, people get bitter. So who am I to be judging someone else?
And attempts to turn the other cheek in the face of another insider attack.
What people send around in texts, I frankly could not care less about.
In a leaked text message from March last year, Barnaby Joyce called Scott Morrison a hypocrite and a liar. Words he now says he regrets.
I'd like to start where I finished and unreservedly apologise to the Prime Minister.
A backbencher at the time.
And when he was in a pretty dark place, blaming a lot of people.
Mr Joyce claims he didn't know the real Scott Morrison until he became the Deputy Prime Minister.
His observations of me in that relationship has completely transformed his view that he had as a backbencher at a time when his head was in a very different place.
But the year-old character assessment is a gift to the opposition.
Seems like the people who know Scott Morrison the best trust him the least.
And with mere months until the federal election, Liberals are questioning whether the Prime Minister can turn that perception around.
Is Scott Morrison the asset that he was 3 years ago for you in a campaign?
The circumstances are very different now. He's a great campaigner. He has been very focused on the job of getting us through the pandemic. Is that what you're saying? It's different now. I'd like to... we need to get him out talking to people.
Desperate to shift the focus, the Home Affairs Minister announced the imminent reopening of Australia's borders. The details, though, to be determined.
We're going through the process of preparing to open.
What's most damaging about this latest leak is that the damning critique of Scott Morrison's character has once again come from his own side. With the Prime Minister down, the Liberals' first attack ad suggests their strategy is to try and bring the Labor leader down with him.
What do we actually know about Anthony Albanese?
An attempt to define him before voters do. Jane Norman, ABC News, Canberra.
Hospitalisations and reported new COVID infections in Victoria have continued to decrease. The state's recorded 7,169 new cases from PCR and rapid tests, the lowest daily count in just over a month. It takes the number of reported active infections to 60,917, down from more than 63,000 yesterday. Sadly, a further 6 people have died, while the number of people in hospital after contracting the virus sits at 652, 73 in intensive care, with 28 on ventilators. About 43% of the state's adult population has now had a third vaccine dose. Well, after restrictions put a dampener on Midsummer March celebrations last year, crowds were back for the annual Pride celebration in St Kilda today. Melburnians lined the streets to cheer on the 10,500 participants. Christina Cavallari reports.
An explosion of rainbow.
I want to know if you march with me.
Glitter, a touch of skin and pampered pooches. Midsummer March has it all.
It's a day where we can all sort of come together and not be judged for who we are.
For some, it's their first parade.
Yes, very important. Representing 2 tribes. the transgender tribe and North on the back.
Others have made it an annual tradition.
This is my 20th march this year and so proud for every one of them.
Last year crowds were banned because of COVID rules. This year onlookers were back in full force.
So great to have an audience this year.
Coming out and seeing everyone is just absolutely amazing and filling my heart.
Despite calls by some groups for Victoria Police to stay away from the parade, officers marched in uniform. It's the force's 20th year of participating.
We reflect on past mistakes. We can only look forward and we continue to try and build and enhance that trust.
This is the progressive capital of our nation, and that's something that we should all take great pride in.
While it's an annual party, for many revellers, this year's festival marks a serious and important milestone, the 40th anniversary of the decriminalisation of homosexuality in Victoria.
How on the earth we ever had criminalisation of the way people are is beyond me.
And on a day showcasing equality, the state government has released a 10-year plan to help encourage inclusion for LGBTQI+ people. Christina Cavalieri, ABC News, Melbourne.
Survivors of historical sexual abuse at an Anglican school in Gippsland are speaking out about a disparity in compensation payments to different victims. Several past students of Gippsland Grammar received payments of about $100,000 each, but another student who was abused by the same man received more than $1 million after hiring his own lawyer. Jonathan Kendall reports.
Damien Rothstein was a boarder at Gippsland Grammar for 2 years between 1989 and 1990. Away from home and his familiar environment, in 1990 he was sexually abused by Maxwell Perry Hickey, who died in 2010.
I didn't end up career-wise where I wanted to. That's a big thing. Relationships, it impacted who I trusted, how much I trusted.
In 2017, the school offered him a settlement of $40,000. He declined and engaged a lawyer, and late last year he agreed to an out-of-court settlement for $1.1 million. But for other survivors who used the federal government's approved National Redress Scheme, it was a very different result.
I know of 4 of us that have received compensation, and I know that I received probably 8 to 10 times the amount that the other boys did.
Brett Menke was also abused by Max Hickey at Gippsland Grammar. Using the guidelines outlined in the redress scheme, he accepted a payment from the school of $100,000.
For all the hardships I've encountered in my life because of the abuse, it sort of didn't seem that the compensation really was appropriate.
Both men say the abuse has had a big impact on their lives.
They've got their brand that they have to protect, but that's irrelevant. I think a lot of people's lives have been ruined by this, and one life ruined is one life too many.
The school and the Archbishop have apologised privately, but not publicly.
I do not believe that the Archbishop, the leaders, especially the board, are particularly sorry.
The principal of Gippsland Grammar, Lisa Harper, has issued a statement saying the school condemns child abuse in all forms and that she's ashamed that people once associated with the school betrayed the trust of students and parents. She's also said that it would be inappropriate for the school to make any comment about specific claims for redress.
There's no suggestion the payments made by the school are less than what the redress scheme allows, but the payouts negotiated by those with the means to hire legal help show just how limiting the scheme can be.
The redress system unfairly caps damages at $150,000. There are no caps on damages in relation to common law damages that you obtain through the courts.
It's distressing. It's terrible.
Survivor advocates say the scheme adds further stress to an already painful process.
They sold us a line that we would be believed. Well, they do the exact opposite in this process. They don't believe us. They give the institution so many opportunities to say, oh, well, we've got no evidence.
There is an application before the Supreme Court to overturn the settlement deed for another of Max Hickey's survivors. If successful, it paves the way for a much larger payout and will renew the focus on the compensation awarded through the redress scheme.
There is no difference to the damage that these men have had, and there is no difference to the abuse that they have had. There is a very significant amount of difference to the compensation that they receive.
It should have been a matter dealt with equally across the board.
In a statement, the federal government defended the scheme, saying it offers survivors a way to access redress without having to go through the courts. Jonathan Kendall, ABC News, Sale.
Overseas now, and the Queen has expressed her wish that Camilla, the Duchess of Cornwall, be known as Queen Consort when Prince Charles becomes king. The couple has said they were touched and honoured by the message. As Europe correspondent Nick Dole reports, today marks the 70th anniversary of the Queen's reign.
A newly crowned Queen is cheered through the streets of London by an adoring public. Celebrations like these have been repeated for 7 decades. There have been countless highs, but the past year has delivered a series of lows. The Queen's son, Prince Andrew, is accused of sexual assault. He denies it, but with a potentially damaging civil trial looming, she's stripped him of his royal responsibilities.
When it looked as if he was become a danger to the reputation, even perhaps the long-term survival of the monarchy, there was ruthlessness.
Harry and Meghan's interview with Oprah exposed major fault lines in the family. Allegations of racism painted a picture of an institution that was out of touch. Just a few weeks later, the Queen lost her husband, the Duke of Edinburgh, a man she described as her strength and stay. Royal watchers say the monarch is making room for a new generation to rise.
It's quite telling that, in recent photographs and portraits, we've seen the Queen with Prince Charles, Prince William and Prince George. There is the future.
And she's warmed to the Duchess of Cornwall, who's gone from being an outsider to a trusted senior royal. To mark her jubilee, the monarchs declared Camilla should be not just a princess, but a queen. While this weekend officially marks the Platinum Jubilee, the palace is keeping things low-key, with a much bigger celebration promised later this year. But there is one event planned, a challenge to find a dessert that's fit for a queen. British bakers are sending in entries for a so-called platinum pudding. Gwyneth Boys and her blind baking group think the Queen will love their meringue pie.
I'm sure she would. I know she likes honey, so that's why we put honey in the cream.
And the royal seal of approval would be the icing on the cake. Nick Dole, ABC News, London.
Tess Coady has won Australia's first medal at the Winter Olympics in Beijing, taking bronze in the snowboard slopestyle. The 21-year-old tore her anterior cruciate ligament at the 2018 Games, but she's overcome the setback to become the first Australian to win an Olympic medal in the event. Here's our Winter Olympics reporter, Tracy Holmes.
There she is, Tess Coady.
St Kilda's Tess Coady qualified 8th for the final, but Coady endured a nerve-wracking wait while competitors were unable to push her out of 3rd spot.
She's done it! Securing the bronze medal.
Yes! Let's go! That was pretty insane. I sort of was convincing myself that I was going to come 4th, just so that when it happened it would suck a bit less, but yeah, no, stoked that it held.
Zoe Zadowski-Synnott won New Zealand's first ever gold at a Winter Olympics.
She stops it! Okay, this brings tears to the eyes.
It's so sick, the camaraderie is insane, and that was such a special moment down the bottom with all the girls. Yeah, it was fun.
Needs to have a smoking run from here.
Having recently recovered
the last however many years, feeling a little bit embarrassed. I'm so much better than that.
Olympic debutant
has actually no idea about skiing, so he's just provided me with some just great advice about, how to prepare, consistency, when to relax, when to turn on.
Winter sports great Shaun White has announced these games will be his last. The 35-year-old American has won 3 Olympic gold medals in half-pipe snowboarding.
And Tracy Holmes joins us now from Beijing. Tracy, our curlers have just had a win against Switzerland after what's not just been a tumultuous day. They were nearly sent home. What can you tell us about what's happened?
It's just been a huge journey here for Tali Gill and Dean Hewitt. Tali testing positive when she first arrived a week ago. She was viral shedding from a previous infection. Then she was negative all the way through, a couple of positives in the past 24 hours. She was told this morning she would have to go into an isolation facility or fly home. They were preparing to fly home when the expert medical panel met here and decided to give her a reprieve because her rate of positivity was so low she wasn't going to infect anybody. They've had a 9-6 win over Switzerland, their first win here, and another match still to come this evening against Canada.
Brilliant result. Well, Australia has more medal hopes in tonight's action. What's coming up?
Yes, the women's moguls finals tonight. Jakara Anthony's in red-hot form. She qualified fastest for the final. She finished fourth in Pyeongchang, so hoping to do a bit better this time round. And Britt Cox also into the final. She's a four-time Olympian. She's been trying to win an Olympic medal since Vancouver 2010. Hopefully tonight is her night.
Tracy Holmes in Beijing, thank you. Enjoy your night. If you're a parent of a young child, you'll be familiar with the particular challenges of this pandemic. Children under 5 have yet to be vaccinated, and the Omicron variant has caused chaos in the childcare sector. North America correspondent Jade McMillan meets a group of women in the US doing what they can to take back control.
As darkness falls over Boston, therapist Sarah Harmon prepares for an unusual kind of session. Yay! All of the women here are mums, and after 2 years of parenting through a pandemic, they've had enough.
I would suggest, kind of casually, I think maybe what we just need to do is get in a field and scream. Because it's safe, we can socially distance, and we can let some of these emotions process. And people said, let's do it. Why not?
Cool trick. Please go ahead and find your name. One of the biggest challenges facing parents is access to childcare, with the highly infectious Omicron strain forcing kids into quarantine and centres to close. This facility caters to low-income families that can't afford to miss out.
If mom can't go to work or dad can't go to work, there's no work. So when pandemic hit, we knew we had to find a way to stay open as much as we could.
To make that happen, a not-for-profit organisation run by 2 local women pushed the state of Massachusetts to provide free rapid antigen tests to enable a so-called test-to-stay program. It means symptomatic kids or those considered close contacts can still come in each day as long as they test negative for 5 days in a row.
The difference between every exposure, meaning 5 to 10 days out of work, and 5 to 10 days working, can be the difference between keeping and losing your job. It can be the difference between keeping and losing your home.
The testing programs here are helping centres like this one to stay open, but many argue a lot more support is needed for a sector that was already struggling before the pandemic.
Tens of thousands of mostly low-paid workers have left the industry in the US in the past 2 years. And when childcare is difficult to come by, researchers like Jessica Calarco argue mothers are more likely to cut back on their own work to fill the gap.
We treat women as our social safety net. We expect them to hold everything together when the world is falling apart.
It's not just childcare putting parents under pressure. Maryland mother Sharonda Tack feels as though life is on hold until her 4-year-old son can be vaccinated.
You're tearing your hair out, you're frustrated. My biggest thing is, I feel like I can't keep my child safe. And that's the worst fear as a parent.
Pfizer has taken the first major step towards gaining approval from US authorities to offer its shots to children under the age of 5. But after earlier delays, many parents aren't getting their hopes up just yet. Instead, looking to others for inspiration on how to cope right now.
All you want to do is scream. And again, have a community of people you can scream with would be really nice.
Jade McMillan, ABC News, Boston.
Back home, and homes have been lost and one person is in hospital as bushfires threaten towns in the southwest of WA. The fire at Denmark started Friday morning, where it rapidly escalated during the day in difficult weather conditions.
Our rapid damage assessment team has identified 4 homes that have been lost to date and 1 that has been damaged. They're also reporting another 4 structures that have been lost.
In Bridgetown, residents were evacuated, including patients at the local hospital, as firefighters and volunteers worked to contain the blaze. One man sustained serious burns while fighting the bushfire on his rural property near the town. He's in a critical but stable condition. Australia's economy is slowly getting back on track. But for roughly 1 million homeowners, it's about to lead to something they've not experienced before, a rise in interest rates. Here's the ABC's Alan Kohler.
The last rate hike in Australia was November the 3rd, 2010, more than 11 years ago. The RBA cash rate went from 4.5 to 4.75%. The next one could be this year, from 0.1% probably to 0.25%, anytime from May onwards. And the futures market, in fact, thinks that the cash rate could be 1% by the end of the year. Here's what that would look like on a chart. Hardly terrifying, right? An absolute doddle, in fact, except for a couple of things. Here's the number of first home buyer loans that have been made since the last rate hike 11 years ago. 1,141,592. That's how many households have never experienced an increase in their interest rate. And as money became cheaper and banks became marketing machines instead of loan rationers, Australians learned to love debt. And as debt as a percentage of income pushed higher, so did house prices. Or was it the other way around? Anyway, interest rates are now going to be normalised because last week both the Reserve Bank Governor and the Prime Minister predicted that unemployment is going to fall below 4%. And in that situation, it's very difficult to justify abnormal interest rates. But the question is, what's normal? Because we've all forgotten. Let's have another look at that cash rate chart. Normal looks like 5%, doesn't it? And now here's the average variable mortgage rate. When the cash rate is 5%, the mortgage rate is about 7.5%. The last time that happened, 11 years ago, the average mortgage was $363,421, and repayments on that were $2,696 per month. Now the average mortgage is $602,035, and repayments on that at 7.5% interest would be $4,459 per month. $1,775 more. To make that after tax would require an extra $35,000 in annual salary. Except that in the past 11 years, the average annual wage has only gone up $13,300. So maybe the RBA won't be able to normalise interest rates after all.
Alan Kohler. Now to tonight's special report. The lingering pandemic and intense cost of living pressures are promising to make the looming election campaign even more unpredictable than usual. Political reporter Matthew Doran has visited the hotly contested corners of the country to get a sense of the issues that will sway people's votes.
The anticipation for better times ahead is palpable across the country. Lunar New Year in Melbourne, bringing a sense of renewal and hope, sentiments more than welcome in this pandemic-weary city. Despite the noise, celebrations are again muted this year, COVID-19 forcing many events to be cancelled, from the CBD to the suburbs.
Previous years we've had around about 60,000 to 100,000 people show up, and during COVID, that's not really a good thing.
Postponing Box Hill's festival, the obvious choice given soaring case numbers. Organising it in the first place, difficult enough.
I think we made 200 calls in one day asking for potential food vendors, and 70% of them came back bankrupt, like they were gone.
It's a familiar tale for many small businesses, not just in Melbourne. But this area happens to be in one of the nation's most marginal federal electorates. Just a handful of votes could decide the fate of Chisholm, currently held by the Liberals.
The vibe right now is day to day, right? You survive it and you win, right?
Stephen Zeng owns a number of restaurants in the area. One of his chefs died during the pandemic.
My first concern is the health of my family, my community. The second concern would be getting back to the normal way of life.
Carving out a new business model, lacking one basic ingredient.
Now out of lockdown, but with case numbers so high, it's still very difficult in terms of finding staff that wants to work in this kind of environment.
Stephen Zeng's not expecting more financial support from governments, but he's hungry for a coherent plan to help ensure his businesses can survive into the future.
Which is easier said than done. That's why these people are the leaders, right? They have to come up with the solutions.
Right now, there's literally nothing for these shop owners, and a lot of them are going out of business.
Like Stephen Zeng, Richard Shee grew up in Box Hill and says businesses which have served the area for 2 decades are closing their doors.
It's a very, very sad time.
He insists support can't solely be the responsibility of the states and territories.
We live in Australia. We live in Victoria. we do business in the city of Whitehorse. I think it's a team effort, and there just needs to be some help for the small guys.
And while the economic toll of the pandemic is providing food for thought ahead of the election, the social cost is just as high, albeit less visible.
There's a huge increase of demand on our services, particularly for our family violence and elder abuse victim survivors.
The debate over family violence and the treatment of women more broadly has been one of the biggest political and social debates during the last term of Parliament. While welcoming the attention, those on the front line aren't entirely convinced real solutions are in the offing.
I think people are well-meaning, but it can appear to be very knee-jerk sometimes.
More funding always welcome, but better planning is key.
For those of us who have had first-hand experience of family violence, either ourselves or people that we love, or those of us who work in the family violence sector, definitely would be a vote changer in some way, but also because it is so emotive.
A world away from suburban Melbourne, Tasmania's picturesque Tamar Valley's been shielded from the worst of pandemic restrictions. But David Feldheim's vineyards have suffered in the past.
Most people don't get that smoke from bushfires can ruin a whole crop.
He lives in the ultra-marginal electorate of Bass, which the Liberals need to hold on to, protecting his family business so his kids can be the next generation of winemakers front of mind at the ballot box.
It's just shocking. The complete lack of response to the bushfire approach and to the whole ogre of climate change, which I see as a farmer on the front line.
1,600 kilometres away in Brisbane, in the marginal Labor electorate of Griffith, Noam O'Reilly's on the hunt for a new house.
I've been a renter for 10 years now, and during the 10 years I've lived in 9 different places.
The home she currently rents is being sold by its owners.
I assume because the market is doing so well at the moment, this property sold for $610,000 in 2018, and it's now valued at 1.2 to 1.5 million.
After losing her job during the pandemic, Noam went back to university, finding an affordable place to live while juggling work and study, proving incredibly tough.
You're overhearing conversations where people are offering to pay 3 months rent in advance or hundreds of dollars over the weekly asking price just to secure a property.
Searching for accommodation and policies from the nation's leaders.
I think there's probably a problem with how we're discussing housing affordability and the divide that's created, the us versus them, landlords versus tenants, millennials versus boomers, if you like.
As the drumbeats of the election grow ever louder, the pandemic has brought some perennial political issues into even sharper focus.
2022 is the year of the tiger, an animal which symbolises strength, power and leadership, all traits that our political leaders will be hoping the public see in them during the campaign. But they'll have to wait until election day before they find out just how the nation has roared. Matthew Doran, ABC News, Melbourne.
Adelaide is the only undefeated team in the AFLW after Fremantle's narrow loss to North Melbourne in round 5. The Kangaroos pipped Freo by 10 points in a nail-biter. The Crows' big last quarter saw them demolish Carlton by 39 points, while the Western Bulldogs recorded their first win for the season against an injury-hit Richmond.
Two teams who desperately needed a win, and it was the Bulldogs who got going early through Nell Morris-Dalton. It took until well into the second quarter before captain Katie Brennan kicked Richmond's first.
Oh, she's done it perfectly.
It was a fierce contest and players were regularly going down. The Tigers kept losing players to injury, first Laura McClelland and then Hannah Birchall out of the game. The Dogs took full advantage, flying high to finally clock up a first win of the season. Adelaide was hell-bent on defending its unbeaten record when it faced Carlton.
But what a piece of play from Sarah Allen.
Only inaccuracy keeping the Crows in check, up by 16 points at half-time. Carlton hopes rose on the resumption.
And G puts the Blues on the board.
But it wasn't to be, the Crows finding the class when it was needed.
Ponta regathers and the Crows make the Blues pay.
In Hobart, goals were at a premium, with North Melbourne striking first.
Abertangelo, he gets the first goal of the game.
Gemma Houghton quickly struck back for the league leaders, the Kangaroos, by just 3 points at half-time. A dour third term came to life late through North's Isabella Eddy.
She can line up for a 45 to the goal line, and there's the drought broken.
Before the Dockers' Ebony Antonio hit back.
Now Antonio, can she produce some brilliance? Oh, you bet she can.
The Kangaroos by 6 points. A strong mark late in the last quarter from Talia Randall was crucial, her goal sealing the points in a hard-earned thriller. Matthew Smith, ABC News.
Melbourne Victory has added some silverware to its trophy cabinet, winning the FFA Cup 2-1 over the Central Coast Mariners. In front of its home crowd, the Victory created plenty of chances, but it took until the 70th minute for the breakthrough.
That is a goal worthy of a cup final, possibly to win a cup final. It's a bullet from Jason Davidson.
The home side added a second goal in stoppage time through star striker Chris Ikonomidis. Central Coast skipper Oliver Bosanic clawed one back in the 97th minute, but it wasn't enough. It's the Victory's second FFA Cup crown and first since 2015. In the A-League Women, Melbourne City has won its fourth straight game, defeating Western Sydney Wanderers 2-1. City forward Rihanna Policina opened the ledger in the 28th minute for the home side and then soon added a second.
What a goal! Holly McNamara, the real deal.
The Wanderers got one back before half-time through Tegan Collister before the half, but City held on for the win. Meanwhile, in the men's, the Wellington Phoenix have snapped a 4-game losing streak, defeating the Macarthur Bulls 3-1. With the Ashes already in the bag, Australia's women are continuing to assert their dominance in the series, today thumping England by 5 wickets in the second one-dayer in Melbourne. The focus now turns to completing a clean sweep of the one-day matches in Tuesday's final game of the series.
Australian captain Meg Lanning sent England in after winning the toss, and initially it looked a bold move. But Australia had both England openers inside 11 overs and then claimed Nat Siver to start yet another collapse.
Cries of catch it and safely taken.
5 for 11 across 9 overs England lost. Lanning with a late nomination for the catch of the summer.
It's not past Meg Lanning, it's gone into her hand.
Sophie Eccleston's unbeaten 32 added some respectability, but 129 all out felt well short of par.
Edged and gone.
In reply, Rachel Haynes looked strong until she offered an edge.
Oh, edged and taken by Jones.
Before the skipper fell the same way and to the same bowler as in the last match.
And bowls her again.
And so, having already destroyed England with the ball, taking 3 wickets each, Talia McGrath and Elise Perry set about finishing them off with the bat.
What's this back down the ground?
But McGrath played a round one from Kate Cross and Perry was caught short, leaving Ash Gardner to complete the task.
Up and over the top from Ash Gardner.
England left with a familiar tale, the loss of regular wickets in their batting innings, again their downfall.
Just find a way to get some partnerships together, really, because that's what we're lacking. We've had a few starts and a few little partnerships, but haven't really been able to get that big game-defining partnership.
So it was nice to be able to sort of, finish him off, I guess, take those 10 wickets, and we would have probably liked to finish it off a little bit better with the bat, but nice to get the win nonetheless.
The Women's Ashes wraps up in Melbourne on Tuesday before both sides head to New Zealand to commence quarantine ahead of next month's World Cup. Brett McKay, ABC News.
As Cricket Australia deals with the fallout from the shock resignation of coach Justin Langer, questions are being asked about the internal workings of the organisation. Langer is quarantining in Perth after he sensationally quit the job via social media on Saturday morning, following months of speculation over his future. Cricket writer Gideon Haigh says the whole incident leaves a sour taste.
With that sense that you often get in Australian cricket of that you're not being told everything that matters, and also a sense of just how little people seem to matter at Jolimont. If they treat a great servant of the game like this, just imagine what they get away with in private.
Langer released his resignation letter late on Sunday to the Australian newspaper, saying he's happy with his decision to reject the short-term deal offered to him. He says he hopes the Australian team has made supporters proud in the 4 years he's been in charge. In the NBL, Tasmania has ruined Melbourne United's homecoming with a convincing 9-point win on the road in front of the largest crowd at John Cain Arena in 2 years. More than 8,000 fans were there for United's first home game in 7 weeks, but Tasmania spoiled the party on the back of some red-hot shooting. Facing the top defensive team in the competition, the Jack Jumpers scored 36 points in the highest scoring quarter this season. A 12-0 run by Melbourne in the third quarter brought them right back into the contest, but the Jack Jumpers weathered the storm. For Tasmania, it's their 4th straight win and their first on the mainland. Elsewhere, the Sydney Kings got a much-needed win at home against a struggling New Zealand Breakers side, winning by 19 points. Well, the weather in Canberra has been a bit cool this weekend, but those at the capital's first chili festival probably didn't notice. For some of the entrants in the Australian Chili Eating Championships, it was all a bit too hot to handle.
3, 2, 1, 2!
Some like it hot, but this is a whole new level. Canberra's first chili festival hosted the Australian Extreme Meatball Challenge. Drink some milk and you're out. Not many could take the heat, and soon there was a winner.
Mass on fire, nose is running. I need to go to the toilet in a minute, I think.
There was carnage amongst the losers, but that was just the curtain raiser to the ACT League of the Australian Chili Championships. The favourite was local man and last year's national runner-up, Rod the Dragon Morris, but he and others fell by the wayside.
The pain that we go through with these challenges is absolutely intense.
Central Coast man Adam the King Connell survived an hour of eating chilies to win. Chantel Candy, dubbed the Blazing Blondie by today's crowd, was the best placed local, making her the ACT champion.
Excruciating. You feel dizzy and blurry and everything afterwards, yeah.
It wasn't all bizarre eating contests. There was plenty of sauce and some food stalls for the chili curious.
The vendors come from New South Wales and Victoria, outskirts of Melbourne, outskirts of Sydney, country New South Wales, Mount George.
As well as local farmers who battle Pialigo's chill to produce the goods.
Our growing season's very short. We get our plants down early November and we only grow through till first frost in early May.
The capital's Chili Festival will be back next year with vendors returning record sales. There is a warning from organisers though. It's still too hot for some. Peter Lusted, ABC News, Canberra.
Peter Lusted on fire. Now to the weather, not so chilly here, in fact very pleasant. It was pretty mild on the west overnight, a bit cooler in the east, minimums between 11 and 17 degrees. Dry and mostly sunny today with just a few showers over the Gippsland Ranges in the morning. The state's top of 33 was recorded at Dartmoor. In Melbourne it got to a pleasant 26.6 degrees, around 3 this afternoon. In the city now it's still 26 degrees. Interstate today, Sydney, Perth, Darwin and Brisbane had a few showers. Now the satellite is showing cloud covering the tropical north of the country, some cloud over southern WA. There's a large high-pressure system southeast of Tasmania with an associated trough. That'll reach the far west of our state by late Tuesday. Showers and storms for the top end, some showers along the east coast. For the capital cities, showers for Sydney and Brisbane and stormy in Darwin. Back home, it'll be a mainly dry and warm day in most of the state. The fire danger will be high to very high in the west and central districts. Some morning fog patches in Gippsland and then a partly cloudy day with just some isolated showers. On the bays, we'll have easterly winds between 15 and 25, up to 30 knots early in the morning. Waves will be up to 1.5 metres. Now there's a strong wind warning for Port Phillip, West Coast and Central Coast. For Melbourne, it'll be a mostly sunny day, patchy fog about the nearby hills in the early morning, a top of 29, down to 15 tonight. And looking ahead, Tuesday mostly sunny 31, partly cloudy on Wednesday, Thursday and Friday, 29, 23 and 28. Next sunny weekend is next weekend, 33 and 36. I got it out. That's it for tonight's bulletin. Enjoy the rest of your evening. Good night.
Next.